A gemstone almost nobody wanted 10 years ago is quietly entering luxury collections. That is not normal. Across the gem trade, strange things have started happening. Dealers losing access to stones they could once buy easily. Collectors refusing to sell rare specimens at any price. And obscure minerals most buyers have never heard of suddenly appearing beside emeralds, sapphires, and high-end auction jewelry. One of them was mistaken for a fake gemstone for decades. Another may already be too rare for the mainstream market to catch. And by late 2026, several of these overlooked stones could look shockingly undervalued compared to where the market is heading next. Starting with a green gemstone the industry underestimated for far too long. Number 10. Chrome diopside, the dismissed alternative. For years, chrome diopside lived in the shadow of emerald. Too inexpensive, too unfamiliar, too often dismissed as a temporary substitute for buyers who couldn't afford deeper luxury. And that may have been the market's biggest mistake. At first glance, the gemstone almost feels suspiciously rich for its price. Deep forest greens, intense saturation, flashes of vivid color that, under the right lighting, can resemble stones worth many times more. Yet for decades, chrome diopside remained strangely overlooked outside small collector circles and boutique jewelry markets. Part of that came down to geography. Much of the finest material originated from the remote permafrost regions of Siberia, where mining seasons remained brutally short and production conditions extremely limited. Unlike mass-market gemstones flowing steadily through global supply chains, fine chrome diopside entered the market in unpredictable waves. Some years produced remarkable material. Others produced almost nothing collectors considered investment-worthy. And quietly, something began changing. As premium emerald prices climbed higher through luxury auctions and elite jewelry houses, buyers started searching for alternatives that still carried strong visual impact without entering six-figure territory. That search slowly pushed attention toward overlooked green gemstones with cleaner crystals, vivid color, and tighter supply than most casual buyers realized. Chrome diopside fit that gap almost perfectly. Not because it replaced emerald, but because it created a different kind of appeal. The finest stones carried a colder, deeper green, less soft, less romantic, more dramatic. Under darker lighting, some specimens developed an almost mysterious glow that photographers and high-end jewelry designers quietly started embracing in editorial work and custom pieces. Most mainstream buyers still haven't noticed. That matters more than it appears. Gemstone markets often move long before public awareness catches up. By the time average buyers begin searching for a stone in large numbers, elite collectors and boutique dealers have usually been accumulating fine material for years. And chrome diopside has already started showing some of those early signals. Higher quality stones becoming harder to source consistently. Collector discussions quietly increasing. Luxury designers experimenting with darker green palettes again, and perhaps most importantly, growing recognition that truly vivid natural green gemstones are becoming increasingly difficult to obtain at accessible prices. No serious gem expert expects chrome diopside to suddenly replace emerald at the top of the luxury hierarchy. But that may not be the real story. The real story may be that one of the gemstone market's most ignored greenstones is finally beginning to outgrow the cheap alternative label it carried for decades. And by late 2026, that shift may become impossible to ignore. Number 9. Andalusite, the optical illusion. Tilt an Andalusite gemstone just a few degrees, and the entire stone can seem to change personality. Olive green suddenly shifts into bronze. Bronze melts into amber. Then streaks of reddish gold appear where darker tones existed only seconds earlier. No artificial treatment, no modern enhancement, just crystal structure manipulating light in ways that still surprise experienced collectors. That unusual effect is known as pleochroism, and few gemstones display it with the quiet complexity of fine Andalusite. Unlike gems that rely on explosive sparkle or intense saturation to dominate attention, Andalusite creates something more subtle, a gemstone that rewards observation instead of demanding it. And for years, that subtlety worked against it. The modern jewelry market often favors immediate visual impact. Neon blues, violent reds, bright greens that stand out instantly under showroom lighting and social media photography. Andalusite never fit comfortably into that system. Its beauty appears slowly, sometimes almost reluctantly. But collector psychology has started evolving. Across luxury markets, there has been growing fatigue around gemstones that feel overly commercialized or aggressively marketed. More buyers have begun gravitating toward stones with individuality, optical uniqueness, and a sense of discovery. Gemstones that feel personal rather than mass-produced. That shift quietly opened the door for Andalusite, especially high-grade material with strong color separation and exceptional clarity. Fine specimens remain surprisingly scarce compared to mainstream gems, largely because truly vivid pleochroic performance only appears in a narrow percentage of stones. Many commercial pieces look muddy or overly dark, but when cutters uncover exceptional rough and orient the crystal correctly, the result can feel almost alive under changing light. That rarity has started attracting a different category of buyer. Not trend-driven shoppers, not speculative hype collectors, but experienced enthusiasts searching for gemstones that still feel undiscovered by the broader market. The timing may matter more than it seems. As luxury jewelry continues shifting toward storytelling, craftsmanship, and unusual natural phenomena, gemstones like Andalusite suddenly become easier to position as conversation pieces rather than secondary stones. Designers have already begun experimenting with earth-tone palettes, warmer metals, and more organic aesthetics, exactly the environment where fine Andalusite performs best. And unlike heavily mined mainstream gems, the supply pipeline for premium Andalusite remains relatively small and inconsistent. That combination creates quiet pressure, limited public awareness, limited fine material, growing fascination among niche collectors. The gemstone market has seen this pattern before. A stone ignored for decades suddenly gains recognition not because it changed, but because the audience finally did. Andalusite may be entering that stage now, especially as more collectors begin realizing that some of the most fascinating gemstones in the world were never designed to impress instantly. They were designed to be noticed twice. Number 8. Natural zircon, the reputation trap. Few gemstones have suffered more from mistaken identity than natural zircon. Mention the word zircon in a jewelry store, and many buyers immediately think of cheap imitation stones sitting under harsh mall lighting. The confusion became so widespread that an entire generation of consumers stopped separating natural zircon from cubic zirconia altogether, even though the two stones share almost nothing beyond part of a name. One is synthetic. The other formed deep within the earth hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of years ago. Some zircon crystals discovered by geologists are older than nearly every life form that has ever existed on the planet. That alone gives the gemstone a scientific significance few luxury buyers fully appreciate. Yet despite its extraordinary age and natural brilliance, zircon spent decades trapped inside one of the jewelry market's worst branding disasters. Ironically, the stone itself was never the problem. Fine natural zircon possesses remarkable fire, intense light dispersion, and a warmth that many collectors describe as more alive than modern commercial gems. Under proper lighting, exceptional specimens can produce flashes of gold, champagne, blue, and white light that feel almost liquid in motion. And unlike many heavily promoted gemstones, zircon still exists in a strange market blind spot, not rare enough to dominate headlines, not mainstream enough to dominate jewelry counters, just misunderstood enough to remain undervalued. That misunderstanding may finally be starting to crack. Over the last several years, collector interest in historically overlooked gemstones has quietly accelerated, especially among buyers growing tired of mass-market luxury. More experienced collectors have started prioritizing authenticity, geological age, and natural optical character over simple brand recognition. Natural zircon fits perfectly into that psychological shift. particularly fine blue zircon from Cambodia and untreated warm-toned specimens with exceptional clarity. High-quality stones have become increasingly difficult to source consistently, not because zircon suddenly became fashionable overnight, but because fine material has always been far less common than the public assumed. The market simply never paid close attention before. Now it is. Independent jewelers have begun reintroducing zircon into higher-end custom work. Gem collectors are discussing untreated stones more frequently, and some luxury buyers who once ignored zircon entirely are starting to realize they may have confused one of Earth's oldest natural gemstones with one of the jewelry industry's cheapest simulants. That kind of reputation correction can change markets surprisingly fast, especially when a gemstone already possesses the visual performance, geological story, and collector legitimacy needed to support higher long-term demand. Natural zircon may never become a mainstream status symbol on the level of sapphire or emerald, but that may ultimately protect its appeal rather than limit it. Because in many luxury markets, the most powerful discoveries are rarely the loudest ones. Sometimes they are the stones hidden behind the world's most expensive misunderstanding. Number 7. Sphene, the uncontrollable fire. Under direct light, fine sphene does something that almost feels excessive. Colors fracture violently across the surface. Electric flashes of green, gold, orange, and red burst from inside the stone so intensely that even experienced gem dealers sometimes pause the first time they see a high-quality specimen move under proper lighting. In pure optical fire, sphene can outperform diamond. That fact alone surprises many collectors. But it also raises an obvious question. If the gemstone is capable of producing this level of brilliance, why has it remained so unknown outside specialized gem circles? The answer lies in the same feature that makes sphene so captivating. It is beautiful in a way the jewelry industry struggles to control. Sphene is relatively soft compared to mainstream gemstones, making it difficult to cut, difficult to set, and risky to wear in jewelry exposed to daily impact. One mistake during cutting can damage valuable rough. One poorly designed setting can expose fragile edges. Even transporting fine stones requires more caution than most commercial jewelers prefer dealing with. That challenge quietly limited Sphene's path into the mass market. Large jewelry brands typically prioritize durability, consistency, and scalable inventory. Sphene offers none of those comfortably. Fine material appears irregularly. Color quality varies dramatically, and truly exceptional stones with strong dispersion remain far rarer than casual buyers realize, which may be exactly why collectors have become increasingly fascinated by it. In recent years, the gemstone world has shown growing appetite for stones that feel less manufactured and more emotionally intense. Gemstones with personality, unpredictability, and visible rarity. Sphene fits that mood perfectly. It does not behave like a calm luxury stone. It behaves like something almost unstable under light, and that instability creates memorability. Collectors remember the first great sphene they see, especially larger specimens with vivid green body color and explosive rainbow dispersion. Videos of exceptional stones have started circulating more frequently among niche collector communities, where discussions around undervalued optical gemstones have intensified ahead of 2026. Not because sphene suddenly became trendy, because more buyers are realizing how little fine material actually exists. Mining output remains limited. Clean stones above a few carats become increasingly difficult to source. And unlike heavily commercialized gems supported by massive global branding campaigns, Sphene still operates in a relatively quiet corner of the market, where rarity often matures before mainstream attention arrives. That creates a strange dynamic. The gemstone remains unknown enough to feel undiscovered, yet impressive enough to shock nearly everyone who encounters a top specimen in person. Very few undervalued gemstones possess that combination. And in luxury collectibles, emotional reaction matters more than many markets admit. Some stones are admired, others are remembered instantly. Fine sphene tends to belong to the second category. Number 6. Spinel, the royal mistake. Inside some of history's most famous royal collections sits a gemstone the world misunderstood for centuries. Not hidden in secret vaults, not lost in private museums, displayed openly in crowns, ceremonial jewels, and imperial treasures viewed by millions. And for generations, almost everyone believed those stones were rubies. The confusion lasted so long that Spinel became trapped beneath another gemstone's reputation instead of building its own. Before modern gemology developed the tools to separate similar mineral structures accurately, deep red spinels from regions like Burma were routinely classified as rubies simply because they looked extraordinary enough to deserve royal attention. In reality, many legendary rubies worn by kings and emperors were spinel all along. That historical mistake changed everything about how the market perceived the stone. Rubies became symbols of power. Spinel became the forgotten supporting character. Yet the irony is difficult to ignore. Royal families, elite traders, and ancient collectors consistently selected Spinel not because it was inferior, but because the finest specimens were visually stunning enough to compete with some of the most desired gemstones on Earth. And today, modern collectors are starting to revisit that history with a very different perspective, especially as untreated high-quality ruby becomes increasingly scarce and dramatically more expensive at the top end of the market. Buyers searching for vivid natural reds have begun paying closer attention to gemstones that still possess rarity, beauty, and historical legitimacy without entering the extreme pricing territory surrounding elite rubies. Spinel stands directly inside that conversation now, particularly stones from Myanmar, Vietnam, and Tanzania with exceptional saturation and strong clarity. Unlike many commercial rubies heavily treated to improve appearance, fine spinel often appears remarkably clean in its natural state, giving collectors something increasingly difficult to find in modern luxury gemstones: authenticity without excessive enhancement. That distinction matters more every year. The luxury market has become increasingly educated. More buyers now understand treatments, origins, and gemological nuance. As that awareness grows, gemstones once overshadowed by branding and tradition suddenly gain room to rise on their own merits. Spinel benefits enormously from that shift. Auction houses have already started treating important specimens more seriously. Designer jewelers have incorporated spinel into higher-end collections with growing frequency. And collector discussions around untreated spinel have intensified as supply for premium material tightens quietly in the background. But perhaps the strongest advantage spinel possesses is psychological. It carries rediscovery energy. The feeling that the world overlooked something important for an incredibly long time. Not because the gemstone lacked beauty, because history accidentally handed the spotlight to another stone first. Markets tend to react strongly when forgotten prestige returns, and few gemstones possess a royal legacy more unusual than one admired by emperors long before anyone realized what it actually was. Number 5. Demantoid garnet, the invisible elite market. Certain gemstones never become famous because the people buying them prefer it that way. Demantoid garnet has spent much of its existence inside that kind of market. No massive advertising campaigns, no mainstream jewelry store presence, no global branding machine pushing it into public attention. And yet, for more than a century, some of the most experienced collectors in the gemstone world have quietly treated fine demantoid as something extraordinarily special. Part of the fascination begins with the color. Unlike darker garnets commonly associated with deep reds and browns, demantoid can produce an intensely vivid green that almost seems illuminated from within. Under natural light, exceptional stones display flashes of yellow and emerald tones mixed with remarkable brilliance. A visual combination that feels unusually alive for a garnet. But color alone is not what elevated demantoid into collector mythology. The real obsession comes from something most gemstones try to hide: inclusions. Fine Russian demantoids are famous for delicate internal patterns known as horsetail inclusions, thin golden fibers spreading through the crystal like frozen strands of light. In many gemstones, inclusions reduce value. In Demantoid, the right inclusion can actually increase collector interest because it confirms geographic origin and natural authenticity. That detail transformed the gemstone into something more than decorative luxury. It became connoisseur territory. For decades, the finest material came from Russia's Ural Mountains, where production remained extremely limited and inconsistent. Even today, truly exceptional stones above a few carats are remarkably rare, especially with strong color, good clarity, and desirable internal characteristics. Small supply alone would already create pressure in most luxury markets. But Demantoid faces another factor quietly affecting its future. Visibility is increasing. More boutique jewelers have started introducing unusual collector gemstones into custom high-end work as buyers move away from predictable luxury trends. Instead of purchasing stones everyone already recognizes, wealthy collectors increasingly want rarity with a story attached. Gemstones that feel personal, historic, and difficult to replace. Demantoid fits that shift almost perfectly, especially because it still occupies an unusual space between recognition and obscurity. Serious gem enthusiasts understand its importance. Most casual luxury buyers still do not. That gap often becomes extremely important when niche collectibles begin attracting broader attention, and the market has already shown signs of tightening. Fine Russian stones appear less frequently. Top specimens disappear quickly into private collections. Collector demand has become more international, and premium examples with strong horsetail inclusions continue generating fascination far beyond traditional garnet markets. Yet despite all of that, Demantoid still avoids the speculative frenzy surrounding more famous gemstones. That may be part of its strength. Luxury markets often reward stones that mature quietly before the wider public notices how limited they truly are. Demantoid does not behave like a mainstream trend. It behaves like a gemstone already chosen by collectors long before everyone else arrived. Number 4. Paraiba tourmaline, the disappearing supply. Electric blue was never supposed to exist naturally at this intensity. The first time many collectors encounter a fine Paraiba tourmaline under proper lighting, the reaction is usually immediate. The color does not behave like ordinary gemstone saturation. It glows, almost unnaturally. Neon pools of blue, turquoise, and green seem to radiate from inside the crystal itself, creating an effect closer to illuminated glass than traditional mineral structure. When the gemstone first emerged from Brazil in the late 1980s, the industry struggled to explain what it was seeing. Nothing else looked like it. The secret eventually traced back to copper within the crystal structure, an extremely unusual chemical presence that produced one of the most recognizable gemstone colors ever discovered. Demand exploded almost instantly. Collectors, luxury houses, and elite dealers recognized that Paraiba tourmaline was not simply another attractive stone entering the market. It was an entirely new category of color, and categories like that rarely remain accessible for long. The original Brazilian deposits that produced the most legendary material were never large to begin with. Mining conditions were difficult, production inconsistent, and fine stones astonishingly rare even during peak extraction years. As top specimens disappeared into private collections and high-end jewelry inventories, prices began climbing aggressively across global markets. But the most important shift may not be the prices themselves. It is what is no longer appearing. Large neon stones have become dramatically harder to source. Clean specimens with intense glow are increasingly locked away by collectors unwilling to re-enter the market. Even smaller high-quality stones that once circulated more freely have started commanding prices few buyers would have imagined 20 years ago. And yet, broader public awareness still lags behind the luxury world. Many casual buyers recognize the color without fully understanding the rarity behind it. Others assume additional supply will eventually stabilize the market, especially after copper-bearing material appeared in places like Mozambique. But among experienced collectors, the conversation has already changed. The concern is no longer whether Paraiba tourmaline is important. The concern is how much truly elite material still remains available at all. That tension creates a different kind of market psychology, not speculative excitement. Not temporary trend chasing, something closer to urgency. because gemstones tied to singular visual phenomena occupy dangerous territory once supply begins tightening. There is no direct replacement for the finest Paraiba color. No alternative gemstone reproduces the same electric saturation in exactly the same way. And once collectors believe a category has entered irreversible scarcity, prices can move much faster than public perception expects. Luxury markets have seen this pattern repeatedly with rare watches, fine art, and historic diamonds. By the time the wider audience realizes supply has become a problem, the best examples are usually already gone. Paraiba tourmaline may be approaching that stage now. Not gradually. Quietly. Number 3. Benitoite, the American ghost gem. Some gemstones become valuable because they are beautiful. Others become valuable because almost nobody can find them anymore. Benitoite exists in a stranger category, a gemstone so limited that many collectors spend years hearing about it before ever seeing a fine specimen in person. That rarity begins in a single location. Unlike gemstones mined across multiple continents and massive commercial deposits, Benitoite is tied primarily to one small region of California. The stone was discovered near the San Benito River in the early 20th century, eventually earning recognition as the official state gemstone of California. On paper, that sounds prestigious. In reality, it also reveals the problem. When an entire gemstone category depends heavily on one historically limited source, supply becomes fragile almost immediately. And Benitoite was never abundant to begin with. Fine crystals capable of producing rich color, strong transparency, and desirable cutting material have always been exceptionally scarce. Many specimens remain tiny. Others contain fractures or inclusions that prevent high-end faceting. Truly exceptional stones with vivid blue color and impressive brilliance occupy an incredibly narrow slice of an already restricted market. Then there is the fluorescence. Under ultraviolet light, fine Benitoite can erupt into an intense glowing blue unlike almost anything else in the gemstone world. The effect feels surreal the first time collectors witness it properly, a hidden second identity suddenly appearing beneath the surface. That unusual behavior helped turn Benitoite into something more than a rare American gemstone. It became a collector obsession, but obsessions become dangerous when supply cannot expand. Over time, access to important mining areas tightened. Production slowed dramatically. High-grade material became increasingly difficult to recover consistently. And while public awareness remained relatively low compared to mainstream luxury stones, experienced gem enthusiasts quietly started treating fine Benitoite as one of the most geographically vulnerable gemstones in the collector market. That vulnerability matters, especially now. Modern luxury buyers are increasingly drawn toward stones with specific origin stories, documented scarcity, and emotional uniqueness. All categories where Benitoite performs unusually well. It is not simply rare, it feels isolated, almost disconnected from the wider gemstone trade entirely. That creates psychological weight around ownership. Collectors know they are not competing against endless future production. They are competing against time, disappearing availability, and a gemstone category that may never meaningfully expand beyond its already narrow limits. And unlike heavily commercialized gems pushed constantly through mainstream jewelry marketing, Benitoite still carries discovery energy. Even among affluent buyers, many have never heard of it. Others know the name but underestimate how little fine material actually circulates globally. Markets can change rapidly once that perception shifts. Because when rarity becomes measurable instead of theoretical, collector behavior usually becomes far more aggressive. Benitoite may still exist below mainstream luxury radar today, but gemstones with this combination of beauty, geographic isolation, and supply fragility rarely remain overlooked forever. Number 2. Grandidierite, the gemstone too rare for the mainstream. There are luxury gemstones most collectors dream about owning. Then there are gemstones so scarce that many experienced dealers spend entire careers without handling a truly exceptional specimen. Grandidierite belongs to the second category, The first impression usually comes from the color. Deep blue-green tones shifting between oceanic teal, tropical water, and dark mineral glass create a look unlike almost anything else in the gemstone world. Under softer lighting, fine stones can appear calm and elegant. Under brighter light, flashes of vivid transparency emerge from inside the crystal with an intensity that feels strangely modern for something formed naturally underground. And yet, despite its visual impact, Grandidierite remains almost invisible to the broader luxury market, partly because so little fine material actually exists. The gemstone was first discovered in Madagascar and quickly gained attention among mineralogists for its rarity. But rarity alone does not automatically create collector obsession. What transformed Grandidierite into something extraordinary was the realization that most crystals were unsuitable for high-end faceting at all. Many specimens appeared heavily included. Others lacked transparency. Some fractured too easily during cutting. Clean stones with strong color and gemstone-grade clarity became exceptionally difficult to recover consistently, especially in larger sizes. That imbalance created a strange market dynamic where demand slowly increased among collectors while supply remained trapped at microscopic levels. Even today, gem-quality Grandidierite is encountered so rarely that many buyers only know the stone through auction catalogs, elite dealer inventories, or specialized collector discussions online. That limited exposure may be exactly why its long-term market potential continues attracting attention. The luxury gemstone market has entered a phase where exclusivity alone is no longer enough. Wealthy collectors increasingly want stones that feel undiscovered, geographically isolated, and difficult to compare against mainstream jewelry categories. Grandidierite checks all three conditions unusually well. It does not compete directly with sapphire. It does not resemble emerald closely enough to become a substitute, and it remains too scarce to enter mass commercial circulation comfortably. That isolation gives the gemstone identity. A growing number of custom jewelers and high-end collectors have already started treating fine Grandidierite less like an accessory and more like a conversation piece, something selected specifically because almost nobody else owns one. In luxury markets, that psychological shift can become extremely important once awareness begins spreading beyond niche collector communities, because scarcity behaves differently when the public finally notices it. Production cannot suddenly expand. New inventories do not magically appear, and collectors already holding elite specimens become far less willing to sell. Some gemstones rise because trends push them upward. Others rise because the market slowly realizes there were never enough stones to satisfy future demand in the first place. Grandidierite may be approaching that realization now. Number 1. Tsavorite garnet, the silent successor. Luxury markets rarely announce major shifts while they are happening. They happen quietly at first. A few collectors begin changing preferences. Elite jewelers start sourcing different material. Auction conversations slowly evolve behind closed doors. And years later, the wider public finally notices that an entirely new category of prestige has already formed. That pattern may now be unfolding around Tsavorite garnet. At a distance, the gemstone almost seems too vivid to remain overlooked much longer. Fine Tsavorite produces an intensely rich green that can rival far more famous stones under natural light, yet without many of the visibility issues, heavy inclusions, or fragility concerns associated with traditional emerald. That combination alone would already attract serious attention in the luxury world. But Tsavorite carries something even more important: timing. Discovered in East Africa during the late 20th century, Tsavorite entered a gemstone market already dominated by deeply established names. Emerald owned the green category historically. Collectors, jewelers, and luxury buyers had spent generations associating prestige with Colombian mines, royal jewelry, and legendary auction stones. Breaking into that hierarchy was never going to happen quickly, so Tsavorite evolved differently. Quietly. Instead of exploding through mass-market hype, it earned respect gradually among collectors who cared more about gemological performance than historical branding. Many were surprised by what they found: cleaner crystals, Exceptional brilliance, strong durability, intense saturation without the cloudy appearance common in many emeralds. And unlike heavily commercialized luxury stones, fine Tsavorite remained comparatively limited in supply. Most important deposits are concentrated in Kenya and Tanzania, where high-quality material has always been difficult to recover consistently in larger sizes. Truly exceptional stones above a few carats remain extraordinarily scarce, especially untreated examples with top-level color and clarity. That scarcity is becoming harder for the market to ignore. Over the last decade, high-end jewelers have increasingly incorporated Tsavorite into luxury collections once dominated almost entirely by emerald. Collector interest has expanded internationally, auction visibility has improved, and as gemstone buyers become more educated about treatments, origins, and long-term rarity, Tsavorite's advantages have become far easier to recognize. The stone no longer feels like an alternative, it feels like a category preparing to mature. That distinction matters enormously in collectible markets, because some gemstones rise after trends create demand. Others rise because informed buyers slowly realize the old pricing hierarchy may no longer reflect the actual rarity and performance of the stone itself. Tsavorite sits dangerously close to that territory now, especially while broader public awareness still remains relatively low compared to its luxury potential. Very few undervalued gemstones combine this level of color, durability, rarity, and growing prestige simultaneously. Even fewer still feel early in their market evolution, despite attracting increasingly serious collector attention. And that may ultimately become the most important signal of all. Not that Tsavorite is trying to replace emerald, but that an entirely new generation of luxury buyers may eventually stop viewing it as second place altogether. Some gemstone markets change quietly. Collectors begin buying differently. Rare stones disappear from inventories, and overlooked minerals suddenly start entering luxury collections few people expected them to reach. That is often how major shifts begin. Not with headlines, with scarcity. Several of these gemstones still remain far below mainstream attention today, but by late 2026, that may look very different. Because once the wider market finally catches up, the rarest stones are usually already gone.